So them HPDIs.
Yeah, what about them, Donnie?
Everybody's got a lot of questions about them. Mainly just, what do you think about them? Like, there was a couple asking about the 225 to 300 HPDI, saying they've heard nothing but bad things about them. I'm in that same camp. I've never heard anything good about them, but I've also never taken the cowling off of one. They're pretty old engines, aren't they?
Really? So those 150s were the first time you ever saw an HPDI?
Ever saw one underneath the cowling?
Like to work on it?
Yeah. But I've only heard good things about the 150 HPDI. Yeah,
the 150s, it's a different engine. So you got the 150s, 175, and the 200s. Those are all, I mean, they're both V6s. So 150 to 300 were all V6s. And I think they were from 2000 to 2014, something like that. So, I mean, it had a pretty good run. But they're two different blocks. So the 150 to the 200 was a V6 2.6 liter, and the 225, 250, 300 was a 3.3 liter. And I mean, I don't mind them. Nowadays, I think they get a bad rap just because
they're two strokes.
Yeah, they're two strokes, and they can get expensive. So you're talking about a 23-year-old engine, potentially. Just like anything when they first come out, obviously there's going to be some issues. So I think they got a bad rap out the gate. But once you get them tuned, I mean, they got some power.
Yeah, they're really fuel efficient too, is what I've heard.
Super fuel. Well, it's high pressure direct injection.
Yeah.
It's more efficient compared to the older 4-strokes or the older 2-strokes because it's direct injection. So you're directing, you're injecting the fuel directly into the cylinder with exactly how much you need, opposed to, just dumping fuel in there and sucking it in through like a conventional 2-stroke style, which are going to be the worst. But yeah, they're some of the most fuel efficient engines out there because of that direct injection. But it's high pressure direct injection. So you've got a VST tank that's making like 45, 53, something like that, PSI. And then that fuel, that pressurized fuel is then going to another fuel pump that then amps that up. So wide open throttle, like that 3.3, the 3.3 is the 225 to 300. And that one will get like, I want to say like 2,700 PSI fuel pressure.
Wow. Coming out
of that pump. So it's really high pressure.
Right.
And once they're running really good. And the 2.6 liter, they didn't really have a whole bunch of problems with that one as they did with the 300s and the 250s because it's a massive engine. I mean,
what were the main problems with the 225 to 300? Like what would go wrong the most?
I think that they would eventually run lean and blow up.
That's not good. That's not good ever.
I mean, I think that their biggest problem is that the fuel system. So if you're running ethanol or you're running some crappy fuel, it tears them up because, or you let them sit. So that's kind of the bigger problem that you have now with older HPDIs is that that fuel system can't sit. If you're constantly running fuel and oil through them, keeps everything lubed, keeps everything moving, keeps everything like the O-rings from dry rotting and having problems. And so they'll run. But if you let them sit and then let fuel that has been sitting run through the engine and the fuel system, the filters, the VST, that high pump, in that high pressure pump, there's a bunch of little tiny fuel filters that people call them the mystery filters or whatever. And that'll kind of get clogged. They'll clog those up and it could be a real problem. And then your basic options are to take those filters out. I don't think you can buy them. So you've got to either send the whole pump out to like flagship Marine and they'll rebuild it and put new filters in there, or you just run it without the filters. But then that obviously goes through that pump, then goes down into your injectors and messes up your injectors, and everything on that engine is expensive. Like the hoses, the fuel pipes that are on the back that go from the high pressure pump to the
injectors,
the fuel rails where
right.
the injectors are, is like a, it's not full copper, but it's got like copper ends and it's got like a metal sheathing around it, and those things will get pinholes and they'll leak, and that'll cause you problems. And those things are like a couple $100 a piece, and there's 4 of them. And then it's got injector drivers, 2 sets of them, 2 computers, which are injector drivers, and those are a couple $100 a piece. That whole pump itself is probably $1,000. The fuel pumps inside the VST are like $800. So it's like,
so really there was just too much going on for its own good.
Yeah,
it was just like, unless you were constantly on top of it and running in a certain way, it would just fail. It had too much, so it would.
Well, just like anything else on a boat, if you let it sit.
Sure, but I mean, for the most part, nothing has quite as bad of a reputation as them 225 to 300 HPDIs.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I've never had the cowling off one, but I'm glad I haven't, because I've heard nothing but bad things about them. Like, I've never heard one person say anything good about it. The 150s and 200s, different stories. It's like, everybody's, it's got HPDIs on it. And then they're like, what kind of HPDIs?
Yeah, which ones?
That's always the first question. You say 200s. Oh, okay, then we're good. Yeah, I'll work on that, or I could think about buying that. But but if you say 225 and up, keep it, man. Yeah, I don't even want to look at it, and I never understood why. So I guess it's too much going on, right?
I would say that that would be probably what you could say, is that there's too much going on, because, I mean, once they're running, I mean, they're mean. Like, it's a fast, torquey.
It's one little thing goes out, and then it's expensive.
Super expensive to keep it running. And that's, I think, the biggest problem, especially if you got to pay somebody to work on it. I mean, if you got to pay somebody to come work on it, and now you're throwing, $600, $700, $800 parts at it, it can get really pricey.
Yeah, I guess the biggest problem too is nowadays working on them, the cost of labor to work on them can exceed the worth of the engine, and then it really just gets into the point of, is it worth dumping that kind of money into this engine?
Yeah,
it's probably not. So then just get a repower.
Yeah, that's the answer. Another $30,000 engine on the back of your boat. Like, no, I mean, I don't mind them. I kind of like them. I don't really like working on them anymore. And for that fact right there, is that they have gotten more expensive. So it's kind of like priced it out of, there's only so many ways that you can cut costs on repairing something. Either A, you're going to get cheap labor, and then, how long is it going to take the person to fix it? Or B, you're going to get somebody that's expensive, and now you're paying by the time. And so if you get a good technician there and it takes them, 8 hours to go through something, how much are you going to be there? $1,000. And then you've got to throw a couple $100 parts on top of that. So let's say you need one of those fuel hoses, or, a VST pump, or the high pressure pump. Your bill can go from $1,000 to $3-4 grand. And, I'd rather just not get involved in that, just because of that. It's like, I feel bad, here's somebody that's, got to dump $4 grand into this 20-year-old engine. And, I just don't like getting in that position where, because I don't want to work for free either, and be like, I'll come and go over here and work for 2 days on something, and then then you got to give them a bill, and
they're not happy.
No one's happy at the end of the day, and I'd rather just not be in that situation.
No, I've because somebody commented saying, I don't know if they had a 225 to 300, but they were asking what are ways you can make them reliable engines, and they said because not everyone can afford a 4-stroke, I guess.
Yeah,
but really you know, you might not be able to afford an HPDI of that horsepower range either. It might even just end up being an even bigger headache.
Yep.
You know, so unless you already have it, you know, like if you already have it, what are some ways to make them reliable? Just
clean fuel,
regularly maintenance it, and always change out them filters, because it seems like fuel is.
Fuel's the biggest problem on that, and cleanliness. You know, especially on older engines, like you got to keep the inside engine clean, and especially down here in Florida where you got so much salt air and salt water that everything gets salty. And so if you don't keep that stuff clean, that salt will sit on these components, those fuel rails and your hoses and all that stuff.
Ignition coils.
Yeah,
that ignition coil was rough looking. It was super corroded. Really, those engines as a whole were pretty corroded. It seems like, you know, not this owner. He actually recently bought the boat, and you know, the boat's actually really clean. But maybe the previous owner never really took the cowling off and sprayed it off with some fresh water. You know, probably didn't have it serviced that regularly.
No, and it came from the Keys.
So, that's right. It came from Big Pine.
It came from Big Pine. And he said, you know, the guy, you know, he'd go out and use it. He'd come back home. He might spray it off with, you know, depending on how much fish guts was on it. He'd spray it off a little bit, but that was it. Like he didn't clean the engines, didn't flush them, nothing. Just kind of pulled up to the dock, tied her off, and hopped off. Like,
this owner was like, it was pretty rough when he first bought it. It was a nice boat though. What was it, 25 open contender?
He said he spent a lot of time detailing it, cleaning it, getting it waxed up and all freshened up. But the inside of the cowling obviously still has the lasting effects of, you know, sitting and being used and abused. Good thing is to always, every time you service it, you know, use some like CRC or some kind of anti-corrosive stuff to prevent it. Spray it off after every use when you're out there in salt water. And service them regularly. That'll keep them running long enough. Oh, for sure.
Because once you start neglecting it, I feel like that's when you start having the expensive problems, and that's when it becomes not.
That's when it goes downhill. And I kind of feel also like that's the story for a lot of people. So they go out and buy the boat. And here you've got this HPDI that was on this boat, and it was sitting for 8 years somewhere, or, you know, whatever the case may be. The old owner, you know, would use it, wouldn't clean it, wouldn't, you know, just kind of abused it. And then it let it sit around for a long time, and then he goes ahead and sells the boat, and some person buys it, and now they're trying to find, you know, a technician to come over and, you know, get everything running right again. And now all of a sudden, all these things start popping up because it is such a powerful engine, and there are, you know, it does have those injector drivers and all these other electronics that control it. That's when stuff's going to start breaking. So you've also got the aspect of, okay, you get the engine, you clean it up, you get it all going, you spend, you know, $2-3 grand just changing filters, cleaning it, servicing, doing all this stuff. Now you put it in the water and you put that engine up to 5,500 RPMs, and that high fuel pressure now busts a hole in one of the fuel lines, and all these, an O-ring on an injector's messed up, and now the injector's leaking. So there's like all these other legitimate issues that come onto the table, and it's like, you know, it's not, you know, a $20 fix either. These are, you know, they're legitimate issues that are a few $100s, if not into the thousands. And so how many of those hits can you take before it's like, oh my gosh, like, what did I buy? Like,
no, for sure. I mean, that's the thing is, just in general, they're expensive. You know, even gathering up all the parts for a service. This one had twins. You know, I feel like most people would probably have single HPDIs, but how much were all the parts on that? It was like,
I don't know, it was like $1,300 bucks.
$1,300 in parts for twins. You know, if you're doing the service yourself, then it's probably an
still spending $1,300.
An easier hit though, because you know, then you start adding labor rates and everything, and And really, it's expensive to maintain these motors.
Mm-hmm. I think if you want it to last, the biggest thing is oil. It has to get oil.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use the cheap Walmart, stuff like that. Use some, Yamalube. I would say for an HPDI, give it the Yamaha stuff just because it's a finicky engine. So give it that Yamaha oil and make sure that oil system's working, because that's another thing I think happened. Like an oil pump or something would go. Mm-hmm. And if there's a kind of a failure where maybe the alarm doesn't go off, or maybe, it doesn't see, the oil system doesn't, prevent it from not oiling, and now you're out there running that engine with no oil, and it just, boom, they blow up, which is another big case that would happen to them, is there'd be a failure within the oil system. And
see, you worked back predominantly when HPDIs were around. Like, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. What was that, like the main thing that would happen when an HPDI came in? It's blown up, or?
Well, the 3.3s, yeah. I mean, most people would be offshore running them hard, and they'd either lose oil or something like that, and it would lock up, or injector drivers, injectors, fuel pumps.
How many of them would you see at the marina? Like, how often would one come in?
Not that often.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I can only think of probably 15 to 20 over the 10 years that I was there. Probably 15 to 20 of them that we'd work on. Mm-hmm. And out of those, I want to say we saw 4 of them blow up.
That's interesting. So what did you see the most of
there?
Yeah. Just Verados, L6s. I guarantee it's the L6.
Yeah, probably the L6 because it was a Mercury dealership.
Yeah.
And that engine was just so predominant in the industry.
Yeah.
But
I love me an L6.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe I'm just spoiled. Maybe I got started in the industry too late when they had already figured out the L6.
Yeah.
Because that was one of those, when I was in school, like, I'd heard nothing but bad things about the L6.
Really?
Yeah. Weirdly enough, everybody be like, "Oh, superchargers don't work in the water," blah blah blah, and even like, I don't want to out any instructors, but I remember an instructor bringing up water getting into the supercharger being a big issue, and like, they'd say, "Oh, one little drop of water gets into that supercharger, and boom, there goes the engine, like it just blows it up." And I was like, "Oh my god, like this engine's a nightmare." And then I saw the way Tuconks, shout out to Tuconks, would run their boats hard. Mm-hmm. But those L6s just took it. Mm-hmm. Like it was just, they were good engines from what I saw. I never once seen or even heard of out in the industry, a supercharger blowing up from water getting into it.
I mean, they'll lock up. But most of the supercharger failures were the bearings. Like the bearings would give out. Mm-hmm. And there isn't really there's not really a bearing that they sell that you can put in there. I mean, there's like a resell kit and no, there is that bearing kit. I couldn't remember if it's a resell kit or a bearing kit for the top portion of it, but the inside of it, there isn't really anything that you can service inside of it. Mm-hmm. In the end, I guess making the HPDIs last longer is just pretty much clean fuel and cleaning it up. Make sure you grease it, put CRC on the engine, make sure it's clean on the inside of the cowling, and run clean fuel. Mm-hmm. Good oil, clean fuel. Don't let it sit. Try and run it once a month at least.
Yeah, just making sure that you service them regularly. Mm-hmm. Keep them running.
Yep.
Because neglecting them appears to be the biggest issue.
Yeah, and it gave them a bad rap because when they're running,
they're running hard.
They're running hard. They're good. Yeah. I mean, they sound right. They're nice. I mean, people still like them. They put those 300s. People grab those 300s, put them on bass boats and other boats because they're super light and they pack a punch. So, Yeah.
Yeah. Are they torquey engines? Like how are two strokes as far as?
Oh yeah, instant power.
Yeah, we did a compression test on that at HPDI. Somebody was asking what's good compression for a two-stroke. I think we got around 110 to 115.
Yeah.
On all those cylinders, and that's about a good.
Yeah,
good
it's pretty
compression.
average.
Yeah. He said he got about 115 on all 3 cylinders for a 70 horse 2-stroke. So.
Yeah, yes. that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, really, as long as you got over 100, I don't think you've got mechanically internally, anything going on. As far as the engine mechanically making compression.
Right.
So if you just don't want anything to have a massive spread, like one cylinder be 130 and one cylinder be 95.
Right.
Now that
the difference is probably the bigger factor. Well, yeah, another thing too that you brought up was don't let it sit for too long, the fuel sitting.
Mm-hmm.
How long is too long? Somebody asked a question about, or I think they said they left fuel sitting in their tank for like 9 months. Is ethanol free fuel, untreated, and would it be okay to run through their 2-stroke? 9 months sitting. What do you think?
Non-ethanol, probably take your water separator off, dump it out, see what's in there, and then squeeze your primer bulb and take out some fuel from the tank. Take your boat, and if it's on a trailer or something, tilt the front up so all the fuel runs to the back of the tank. And, water is heavier than fuel. So if the fuel sits on top of the water, as long as you don't have it mixed, all the water will be on the back. Squeeze your primer bulb and pump some out. As long as there's no water in there, I would run it. That 2-stroke is going to eat that. Non-ethanol, good to go. 9 months. You should be all right. As long as it's some quality non-ethanol. But if you've got ethanol fuel and you let it sit for 9 months, now that could potentially be a problem.
Yeah.
Based on phase separation and stuff like. Also the climate that you're in. The more moisture that's in the air in the mornings, the more of a problem it's going to be, because that ethanol basically makes. What happens is condensation builds on the inside walls of the tank, on the fuel tank, because it's vented to the outside air. And so you'll get condensation that builds up on the outside walls on the inside walls of the fuel tank, and then that ethanol absorbs it. So that alcohol basically sucks that water in, and then it separates from the actual fuel and the ethanol water mixture. And then all that just sinks to the bottom. So
all the water and the ethanol, or
Yep.
So that's what. Okay, I'd never gotten like the scientific breakdown as to why ethanol was bad in marine applications. Because what is different in like inside the fuel system versus a car that makes you have to use non-ethanol fuel in a boat?
Well, the car, it's vented to the outside air, but it uses, it's like a, I guess you could call it a sealed system. It's not really sealed. It's vented, but it's not vented like a boat. Like a boat just goes straight out, whereas your car, I think it goes through, different carbon filters and stuff like that. So it doesn't allow that moisture to get sucked in. So that's why your car doesn't have any, problems with that, because it's not straight vented to the outside. Whereas your boat, you got your fuel tank, your fill hose, and then a vent line that goes straight out to the side of the boat and then right out to the outside air.
Right.
So you've got atmospheric air inside your tank. So if you've got a tank that's half full, that's, half that tank is atmospheric air that, if let's say it's really dewy in the morning, you go outside, all the grass and everything, there's dew on everything. Well, that's the same thing that's inside of your fuel tank because of that air pocket. And then again, throw in the ethanol, it just makes that condensation build up on the sides, and then it absorbs it. That's why everybody says to fill your tank up
all the time.
If you leave it, people say to fill it up. That way, it takes that air out of your fuel tank.
Okay, that makes sense. Also, someone asked about the if we put the oil filters on the oil tanks there, honestly, when you first brought that up, I was like, oil filter on a 2-stroke. Haha, very funny. I was like, I thought you were messing with me, but there actually is a little filter there. Where exactly behind the tanks? You did that part. I didn't see it. It was
So in the on Yamaha's oil system, there's a tank in the bilge that's or kind of like it's called a reserve tank.
Right.
And that tank there, on the back of it is where the oil pump is. So there's your tank, a sensor in the tank with like a level on it, and then the pump built under the back of it, and then a little fuel filter, or not fuel filter, but oil filter there in line before the line goes up to the engine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tiny little filter. But
yep, it's a little itty bitty filter like this.
They're expensive. I mean, it was
they're like $20-$30 or something like that.
Was it? I thought it was like $40 a piece.
Oh, really?
I could be wrong, but I thought they were expensive for what they were. It was tiny little filters, you know what I mean? And I was like, man, I mean, stuff gets expensive on those motors easy, quick.
Yeah.
But
once that, so then on the engine you've got another oil tank, and that's your main tank. So there's a sensor inside. Kind of how that system works, just kind of like an overview of that. There's a tank on the engine with a sensor in it, and whenever that sensor gets to about halfway, that tells the oil pump inside the tank inside the bilge to turn on. Mm-hmm. And then that one turns on and then pushes the oil up into the main tank and fills it up. That sensor then turns the oil pump off. Now there's like 4 positions to that switch. So you got, turns the top level of that sensor turns the pump off. There's a middle section that turns it on. And then there's another middle section, or maybe I don't know if there's 4 or 3, but that bottom one, the next section sounds an alarm and turns the pump on. So maybe there's only 3. So if it goes down past that middle point and gets down to the bottom, there's like another trigger there that sounds the alarm at your helm saying, hey, we're out of oil, and then that turns the pump on, and it's supposed to fill up. So if your pump doesn't, you say your pump fails and it can't pump any oil, then that tank's going to get down, it's going to try and turn the pump on, and then it's going to get down to another section that's going to say, hey, we're out of oil, and the pump's not coming on, it's not filling up, and it puts you into a restriction mode, slow mode, or whatever they call it.
Yeah, limp mode or something. I feel like that's a problem, those kind of oil systems, because you said there was issues with them running out of oil, blowing up, but was there a fill cap on the engine to like manually fill oil in there? Or if your pump goes out and you're out there, you're pooped out of luck. Like, yeah,
there's a button next to the pump that's supposed to be able to manually turn that on in case like the sensor or the wiring messes up. But
let's say
if the pump locks up, yeah, exactly, then that's why that other sensor is supposed to sound the alarm.
Right, supposed to, but either people aren't hearing the alarm and just letting them blow, or
the alarm fails.
And it's like now we've got too many things.
Which is why it's supposed to put it into slow mode, though. So it's supposed to restrict your RPM.
Mm-hmm. And there's no way for that float to be bad and just not tell you're out of oil. What if you're?
Yeah, that could happen too.
That was you don't even get put into limp mode. It's just, I think there was too many things to fail in that one system for something so important. You know what I mean? Like fuel, running out of fuel. Your engine doesn't run right or at all, but at least it didn't, blow up. But if you got no oil, you've now just lost a power head. You know what I mean? Like there's a problem there.
At the same time, I think some of the instances that I saw is that it'd be on a boat with twins, and one of the engines would go into slow mode and it'd be restricting it, but the operator didn't know what was going on, so opposed to backing off, trying to figure it out, and turning the engine off and coming in, they just put the handle down and then just try and come in, and when you're coming in 20-30 miles,
yeah,
that's long enough to run out of oil.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like having just I guess space is an issue, and those engines were kind of sleek, but just having a tank like those older Optis or even the older Yamaha 2-strokes that's just built onto the engine that you fill up every time.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Optis didn't.
If I was to, some of the Optis, the early ones did, right?
The smaller ones, like the 135 and stuff like that. But the bigger ones, you couldn't fill that.
Never?
Tank. I mean, you could, but you needed a funnel that was this big because it had a little itty bitty cap on it to get in there.
At least there was some way. But
Yeah.
I just feel like that forces you to be more on top of the oil situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and it would just prevent any issues.
Yeah.
You know, because you're looking at the engine itself and making sure it has oil,
Right.
not just looking at the tank and the bilge, and your pump might not work. You don't even know it. You know, there's.
Yeah. The only way to fill out that tank that's on the engine on the HPDI is you got to take the sensor out. So you take the sensor out and then you pour oil in there. But I mean, in all honesty, a lot of operators they never got to that point. You know, I mean, that's, you know, a lot of people don't even take the cowling off of their engine. I mean, these days, nobody even, when's the last time you opened the hood of your car? I mean, like, obviously you and I do, but
I do that all the time. I do all the time. Sometimes I just like to look at it. I just look at my motor.
Oh, look, yep, that's broken.
Man, that's a beautiful 4.8 liter Vortec motor right there. I love that thing. She'll run to the day I die.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. But better me than some mechanic. Gosh, mechanics charge up the butt, dude.
Here we go.
There's a guy who's pretty upset. He said that mechanics will charge you like, I don't know, he said like 5 hours of labor for 2 hours worth of work and upcharge you 10 to 30% on the parts. And I don't know. I think, you know, that's just the way the business is. That's just the way it's got to be.
I think that's just business in general.
Exactly. You know, I
mean,
you buy, as the mechanic, multiple parts, you know, multiple of the same part. You buy a big bulk
cases
batch,
of stuff.
You get it cheaper, right?
Yep.
So that you can sell it for retail, for what you would normally buy it at a store, right? And you can make a little bit of money off of that. And then there's, you know, the aspect of labor and flat rate. It gets down to, like, why would a better tech have to be punished as far as the money he makes because he figured a problem out quicker, or because he did the work quicker than a slower tech? You know, I think flat rate is a pretty good system, you know, because it challenges you to beat the clock and to be good, and it allows for you to make more money in a certain amount of time.
Because you're the best.
And you have a skill that is the reason you're being hired, because, you know, that person doesn't have that skill, and we're providing you a service that you wouldn't be able to fulfill yourself. So it's, you know, I think it's justified, flat rate, because then it also saves you from a bad tech. You know, if you got a service and you're charging 4 hours for that service, a good tech might have gotten it done in 2, but if there wasn't that flat rate, then a bad tech could have taken 8 hours on that same service, and you'd have had to have been paying 8 hours, because that's what he worked. But but I don't know. What are your thoughts on the flat rate versus salary? Somebody asked about the pay structure for techs and your opinion on the differences between flat rate and salary. He said a lot of places that he sees are starting to move over to salary. What do you think about that?
I mean, in my opinion, I think that that's kind of what it is. That's just kind of the business. Flat rate's kind of there, like you just explained, to kind of put a level playing field on an industry. I mean, you know, as far as the parts go, that's just economics. You know, you go to Walmart or Publix or Winn-Dixie and you buy a, you know, apple for $1. Well, you know, Publix bought that apple for 80 cents and they made 20 cents on the apple. That's just, you know, you're not buying 10,000 apples. You're buying one apple, and, you know, they buy 10,000, they get them for 80 cents a piece. They sell them to you for $1, and they are able to pay the employees, the taxes, the insurance, the travel, the maintenance, all the things the expenses that are incurred in operating a business. And obviously you want to have somewhere to take your engine, and you want to have somebody that can work on it, because, you don't, unless you're a mechanic yourself and you're just going to do everything yourself. But I mean, for most people, there's something that everybody's not good at. Like, if you work on computers, then you might not be a good mechanic. If you build houses, you might not be good at lawn care. I don't know. There's always different. If you're an accountant, you're probably not a mechanic. If you're a mechanic, you're not an accountant. Like, there's different industries. And so you're always going to have to pay somebody eventually. And like you said, I don't think people should be penalized because they get good at something, and they shouldn't be penalized because someone isn't good at something. So, flat rate kind of levels that playing field of, a normal service should take 4 hours or whatever, water pump impeller, all that stuff. All these things should take roughly 4 hours. Obviously stuff happens, bolts break, things get worn. I mean, some people, okay, you ran your boat aground and you burnt up the water pump impeller and you haven't serviced it in 6 years and all the bolts broke off. So, your service took 8 hours. Well, do you want to pay the 8 hours, or do you want to pay 12 hours? Because it gets into that good tech, bad tech. Because the good tech might be able to knock out that full service in 2 hours, and then he's going to spend that 6 hours just trying to fix all the problems that occurred from lack of maintenance and abuse and all that stuff. So, whereas the bad tech, I mean, it could go really bad for you and be twice the cost. So, yeah, I don't think someone should be penalized because they get really good at something. And that should be discussed too, like, the mechanics that you hire. If you're going to, you can either hire a really good quality person that's going to charge you more money, but they're going to get your stuff fixed, and they're going to get it fixed the right way, and you're not going to have a problem after. And even if you do have another problem, they'll come back and fix it. Or if you get the cheap person, it's going to take them twice as long, and there's no guarantees that, they fixed it right. They might give you more problems than what you started with, just because they're just there to, I'm, working for $40 an hour and that's it. Well, he's got no insurance. He's got no Medicare. He's got no, liability. He's got no overhead. He doesn't pay his taxes. Like, all these things go into it. Like, that kind of buffers that, where they charge $100 an hour, pay the mechanic $40 an hour. That $60 gets consumed in all those things. Because if the guy is on your boat and he slips and falls and breaks his arm, now are you going to pay the medical bills? Because, you could have a lawsuit, or because he's a business, he's got insurance, he's got workman's comp, he's got, liability insurance there. So you don't get stuck with the bill because he broke his arm falling off of your boat.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of tricky in the sense of, if you are hiring somebody, you own a marina or something, and you're hiring a tech, salary versus flat rate. A lot of places are moving away from flat rate and paying salary.
Are they though?
Well, in the Keys, yeah, especially that's most of what I know. Like, at the marina, we were salary. It wasn't. It was flat rate.
No, you're hourly.
Well, I think that's kind of what that lumps into, salary, hourly. It's like you're having a set pay, versus flat rate. At flat rate, you make pretty much what you want to make. You can choose to bang out a bunch of jobs that bill for, 4 hours a piece, and it only took you 4 total hours, and you've now got 12 hours in that day. But you didn't work 12 hours in that day. You made that much money, though. Whereas you could complete those same jobs that took 12 hours, but you only worked 8 hours that day, and you're getting your hourly rate. So in that sense, you're technically losing out on the potential money you can make.
Right.
I think flat rate is better if you're beating the clock a lot.
Well, I mean, just trying to look at it from this guy's perception. If you put yourself in his shoes, it sounds like he's saying, oh, I should only ever have to pay for time. Like, however long it takes, that's how much I'm going to pay. And like you said, if you get a good tech, the good tech's going to be penalized. If you get a bad tech, the person paying the bill is going to get penalized. Mm-hmm. But from what I've seen, there's like multiple different structures. So there's either straight hourly, there's straight salary, or there's, like a combination of, incentive pay, like with bonuses, hourly plus bonuses, and then there's full flat rate. I don't know if there's a ton of marine shops. I mean, marinas or in the boat industry of people doing full flat rate opposed to like the cars. Cars, there's so many shops that only do flat rate. There is nothing, above that. Most of the time that's all flat rate. But with a car, it's not near, it's what it is. Change an alternator, change this, change that. Like it's
not as expensive.
Yeah, it's not as expensive. It's a little different because there's way more of the stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas with a boat, there's less mechanics, and some are skilled, some are not. So for a beginning mechanic, he's probably only going to do mainly services. So because you can learn how to do a service, you're changing the oil, changing the water separator, changing the fuel filters, spark plugs, that kind of stuff. And hourly is going to work for that person because it's going to help the business, whoever owns the business, to make a little bit of money, but it's going to give the mechanic some experience, and it's a little bit cheaper labor. Whereas once you get to, say, a seasoned mechanic, they want more of, they're better at what they do. So obviously they want to make more money because everybody's got to make a living. And so a lot of shops will do, a semi. So maybe they'll make $25 an hour. And then if they can bill, 30 hours a week, then they'll make $25 an hour. But if they bill 40 hours for that 40-hour work week, then maybe they'll make $30. So, or if you bill 50, you'll get, 40. If you bill 60, you'll get 55. As it'll go up as the more billable time that you can do. So I've seen more shops do that than full flat rate. I don't know if there is a boat shop that does full flat rate, where if you're here 40 hours a week and you don't bill 1 hour, then you don't get paid. Nothing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the only place that flat rate would work is, like the east coast of Florida or the Keys, like where there's a lot of boats. But like if you're up north and it's, there's seasonal boating and all that stuff, and boating, it's just not as consistent. Being on flat rate would be really inconsistent. It would kind of suck. But I don't know. That just all comes down to how you want to run a business. As far as that.
Sounds like this guy got smoked by a bad mechanic.
Probably.
Like, had a bad mechanic that came in there and was like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, and then got to work and it took him, build him for 10 hours or, just something. Sounds like something. He had a bad experience.
Maybe. I don't know, because his particular complaint was something that happens normally. It's just, 2 hours of labor getting charged for 5. Well, what was the job? I mean, under the flat rate code, there's like different codes per manufacturer. Like they'll have it written in a book. It's like, this should take this.
Right.
If you're under normal circumstances, an average technician should take X amount of hours to do this. If your mechanic took 2 hours and charged you for them 5, the next question is, did he fix it? Like, if it got fixed, then I don't see the problem. Depending on the job, then that's justified. If he didn't, like if he had to come back, he still charged you that 5, and then it's a problem. But
well, also think about the time, the other time too. So you're paying. Let's say it took you got billed for 4 hours and it took 2 hours to do the job. Well, you were on the boat working on the job for 2 hours. What about the time it took you to get all your tools together, get all your parts together, get all your shop supplies together, go over to the boat, unload all your tools, perform all the work, which is your 2 hours, and then take everything back off the boat, clean the boat, take all your tools back, throw away all the trash, clean up all the stuff, dispose of the oil, get rid of the filters, and clean up, your tools and get everything put back the way it was. So, realistically, that flat rate 4 hours has that built into it. So that way, because there's stuff behind the scenes that you don't see.
Right.
There's,
that makes a lot of sense.
Like,
accounting for the little things, like the cleanup and all that stuff. Like, 'cause it takes longer than you think for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my opinion, I think you have to account for that stuff, because if not, do you want somebody that's really disorganized all over your boat and getting stuff, dropping tools on your boat, scratching the gel coat, getting fingerprints all over it and leaving it all trashed and dirty and scratched up? Or do you want the guy to come and take an extra 15 minutes or so and then to spray it down with simple grain, clean it up? And if the guy's got his tools all thrown in the back of a van, he's all disorganized, then that's costing you time too. You kind of want to have a mechanic that shows up that's got all his tools all clean and ready and laid out. And then, he pulls everything out, uses everything, and then has time to clean up all his tools, put them all back where they belong so things aren't lost. What if the guy forgets something in your engine and now you drive off and you've got a pair of pliers flying around in your engine cowling?
Well, yeah, I don't know. That's just...
that's how they do it in the aviation world. Like Big Nate was saying, he everything there is in its position and labeled. So like if, this guy gets done working on an airplane, if he's missing a wrench, that plane doesn't go in the air until that wrench is found. Because what if that wrench is in, some compartment that could come out and fall out and cut something, and now you got an airplane falling out of the sky?
Yeah,
because the guy forgot a wrench.
But that's a big point there, is you got an airplane falling out of the sky. There's a lot more liability and tighter tolerances in the aviation world, So yeah, things got to be a little more. I don't think having the most organized setup is as important as just getting it fixed right in a reasonable manner, as far as time and cleanliness,
Yeah.
But as far as how you want to carry around your tools, sometimes you're just limited by your space.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, so it does depend on what you've got, how you're getting to the job. Also, whether you're mobile or you're at a shop, because there's, some places you got a shop, you pull the boat right in there, boom, and everything's right there. So, they're going to be a little bit quicker than, the person that's doing mobile. Mobile, you got to go to wherever the vehicle is, load up your vehicle, load up your tools, and then drive over to the boat, unload, and, let's also say that you've got the boat at a marina. So now you've got to get into the marina. A lot of them you got to check in, and so there's that process too. So, there's always going to be downtime. There's also the time that they spend doing the paperwork. So you might be getting billed 4 hours, and yeah, the mechanic was only on the boat for 2 hours, but yet all the back end work that had to go in, that's why there's that 4 hour buffer there to account for the billing, the paperwork, the, ordering all the parts, keeping the parts in stock. Like there's a lot of back end stuff that probably takes well above the 4 hours that you pay, opposed to, just being able to physically see the mechanic on the boat. You see physical work of 2 hours being done, but yet there's another 4, 5, 6 hours of back end work that you didn't see. But somehow somebody's got to pay for that, because you can't go to a job and take one full day and spend, ordering the parts, cleaning up, doing the job, cleaning up again, and then billing and doing all the paperwork. And let's say you spend 6 hours. So that entire day, all you're going to make is the 2 hours that you were able to bill. You can't make a living doing that. So why would you? So I mean, I'm not going to be working on anybody's boat like that. Like that's because then what am I supposed to do? Not
no,
go live under the bridge.
I feel like it is fair to, get charged a little more for, being mobile because, we're taking a big process out of your time, which is taking the boat to a marina or a shop to have it serviced. We're just going to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth between the billing of stuff, and I think it's it's just how it is.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Most people are going to be happy. The price is what the price is. That's also why they say okay, it's 4 hours, so it's $1,500 to do the job. Okay, well, there you go. It's $1,500 per engine. Now you already know going in, it's going to cost me 2, 3, whatever the number is to do this job on my boat. Mm-hmm. So that way it's not like a surprise. Like, whereas if you only are going to pay hourly, then, somebody's going to try and figure out how to make money. And most of the time they'll take it to the extreme of, lying, cheating, stealing, whatever else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody commented on our service rig.
Ooh.
Which I find to be the sweetest rig out there. The old Honda Element.
Yeah.
Sweet Ellie. She's a sleeper.
I don't know if I call her a sleeper, but
I don't know, man. She might not be the fastest around. She might not get the best fuel economy.
Nope.
But she's low key.
Yep.
Nobody ever suspects a Honda Element to be carrying around tools and parts.
Mm-hmm.
The windows are nice and tinted, so if you looked in, you can't see anything anyway.
Yep.
And it holds a lot.
It does hold a surprisingly large amount of stuff.
Oh yeah, them back seats just come right out.
Mm-hmm.
Just fold up, come right out, and
it's got tailgate.
There's a tailgate. It's perfect, and it's got a neatly built flap that comes down that covers the
gap,
the little gap between the
tailgate and the floor.
Yeah. And so it's a cool vehicle. It's not one that you'd suspect for a service vehicle, but it gets the job done. It gets it done right. Ellie's cool. There's the back seats, like I said, they come right out, and there's so much space in there. You can just put little tubs full of your parts and a couple tool bags. Since you're mobile, you'll be taking a bag out and bringing it onto the boat, which I feel like it's not even just a mobile thing. That's even at the yard, at the marina. That's how it was. It was, carrying around a tool bag. Whereas I feel like in the auto industry, a toolbox is more important.
Yeah.
Because you're there in your bay, which I kind of envy because I want to have a nice toolbox set up and have it next to my work area, and just everything I know is right there in its place. And, I know everything that I need is there. Because there's a lot of times you got to run back to the toolbox to grab something that you didn't have in the bag. There wasn't space for it in the bag. And
I think
that adds time.
You're always going to have bags on a boat compared, in the automotive, you got like service carts. So you got your main toolbox and a service cart that you roll out right there next to, the vehicle with all your main stuff. But on a boat, you've got to climb up in the boat.
Right.
So no matter what.
But you could have a bag that you just fill up with what you need.
That's all I'm saying. I think that in the boat, you're always going to have a tool bag. You're not going to have, a box.
No, for sure. Like inside the boat. That makes sense. And there's, a ton of stuff that you can't just carry everything with your hands onto the boat. So yeah, you'll need a bag, but being right next to your toolbox versus being across the yard from a toolbox or miles away from your toolbox, being mobile, then it takes a bit of convenience out of it.
100%.
So
100%.
The Element's nice. She holds a lot. We can get most of what we need in there. I haven't found myself being like, oh crap, forgot this part, let's go back, because it's typically got everything we need. She's a sweet rig.
Yeah, I like it. Well, I think that's going to have to wrap it up for this week because I think we've been on here for quite a while. And so anybody else wants to topic for us to discuss, put it in the comments below, or you can email us at askbab@bornagainboating.com. And then we'll get to as many comments, questions as we can. If we missed yours, then we do apologize. Just keep dropping them down below, and we'll get to as many of them as we can.